Hey folks, Dust here, and I wanted to discuss a new Envy, or I guess I should say another new Envy, as of course at the very end of last year, Envy had announced a new CSGO lineup, and it was to come to the North American scene and to pick up a lineup that was an EPL, retain that license, and then kind of build upon it. And I already made a video about this lineup way back in October of 2018 if you want to check it out. But essentially, it was a lineup that didn't really excite anyone, right? I mean, there was a lot of players on the team that kind of made you scratch your head. Why would you want this team? Especially an organization as big as Envy that had a lot of successful French teams in CSGO's history. It really felt like a lackluster lineup that wasn't going to really be able to amount to much. But a lot of people kind of knew that, hey, yeah, this team doesn't look that great now, but this is them just trying to get into the scene, get a pro league spot, have some foundational pieces you want to build from in the future, and then over time you're going to recruit new talent to the team and try to build something out of this. And so this is what this new move is essentially, because what they've done is they had Kerrigan standing in for Pollo, so that is obviously gone as Kerrigan's moved over to Mousesports, and there was no desire to bring Pollo back to the line. But then they've removed Cutler and Drone, and they've brought in three new players to play alongside Nifty and JDM, who have been on the team since October of last year. And these three new players are, of course, Somme, the young 16-year-old, who doesn't really have any pro experience, but we've seen him play with a couple of teams here and there in some online tournaments. Then you have Fugly coming over from NRG, who, of course, recently got dropped from that team when they picked up Tarek. And then you have Android, a player who got removed from Complexity some time ago and had been on the hunt for a new team ever since. And that is the new lineup that we have now. Now, as far as did this lineup need changes? Oh, hell yes, because this team was going nowhere fast at all. I mean, the team basically completely bombed the last season of EPL with their original lineup, which was essentially Cutler, Drone, Nifty, JDM, and originally Sinfis before Polio, then before Kerrigan standing in. But Kerrigan was, of course, not a part of any of the EPL player things of that nature. So, yeah, they completely bombed EPL, were able to play their way back in through relegation by beating out teams like Can't Winterland and Singularity from the MDL League, but still nothing really to be too impressed by. They also bombed out of that DreamHack Atlanta event in November of 2018, where they lost to Complexity and Luminosity, and they didn't even look competitive in those games, by the way. It was definitely really, really poor. And then, other than that, that original lineup didn't really do much. They played in the Starlighter qualifier where they had a couple of cool wins over Complexity and Luminosity in some best of threes, but then ultimately lost to Rogue, so didn't qualify for Starlighter. They were able to qualify for the minor over Mythic and Rogue, so that was pretty good, but obviously by then they had already removed Pollo and had Kerrigan come stand in. And with him standing in, they actually did do well enough in the minor to make it to the play-in, because they did beat INTZ and Team 1, the two Brazilian teams, after losing to Energy and Furia. Once in the play-in, though, they weren't really able to do much, losing the Wind Strike and North pretty quickly, so didn't advance to the Challenger stage as a major. And then they played in the IM Sydney qualifiers with Kerrigan also still standing in, but again, didn't really do much in that tournament, got knocked out real fast. Then, since then, now with this new lineup, they've only played one tournament, which is DreamHack Masters Dallas qualifier, which we'll talk a little bit more as we get through some of these players. But as far as the players they removing Cutler and Drone. With Cutler, I can understand why. I mean, he's definitely a guy who's getting up there in years, and if you want to bring in kind of new, young talent to kind of revitalize the team, I can understand why you wouldn't want to keep Cutler on board. Yes, it is certainly true that his form dipped, whenever you think about the major play-in and the IM Sydney qualifiers and the minor at IM Katowice and things like that. Certainly wasn't performing that well. But he did come out with Twit longer, and you can kind of understand where he was coming from, where his role, shifted vastly. Definitely a very chaotic environment for Cutler. Definitely hard to be able to perform. And really, no one was performing on this team, for 100% honest, through, EPL and DreamHack Atlanta late last year. It really wasn't until kind of the America's Minor qualifying, the America's Minor and the play-in and stuff kind of, at the beginning of this year that some of these players finally started to spark back up and get some individual form. I do think Cutler could still be valuable to perhaps a lower end pro league team or a top level MDL team as an in-game leader or some type of support player. I definitely don't think that this should mean that he needs to retire and that, all hope is lost and that he has no value to bring to the North American scene. I really do think that he can be that veteran that can help bring up young talent, like I said, on maybe new coming pro league teams or top MDL level teams. So I definitely think he has his value there. So I would expect we should see him floating around on another team. It's just, if this Envy team was hoping to compete in the mid tier, which means you have to compete against teams, like a Complexity or like some of these other kind of middle of the pack teams, like some of the Brazilian teams that are coming up, like Fury is about to be one of those middle of the pack North American teams that can start challenging, and maybe Luminosity, they can never get their act together. There's several teams that kind of compete like right on the verge of getting a pro league playoff spot rather. And so I don't think he's really at that level, or at least I haven't seen it in a while, but I do think that he still is serviceable somewhere. Then when it comes to Drone being removed from the team, I personally was just never impressed by this player. Even before he got picked up by Envy when he was playing with Splice, and even going before that, some of his other teams, like at the MDL level, I just never really saw it. I mean, he was a pretty good player. He was okay, but it wasn't like one of these like young upcoming talents that have like a lot of hype around them. Yeah, I didn't really feel that same way about Drone. And it's not like Drone's completely terrible. He definitely has some good games, but as far as being like some consistent performer, it just isn't there. It is certainly true that it seemed like he got a little bit better as time went on. Like, you know, when you look at, you know, some of the stuff he was doing, like to qualify for the America's Minor, that Starlighter qualifier at the end of last year compared to like the EPL season, definitely seemed like he improved a little bit as a player, but I really can't see him being a player on a team any better than, like I said, a lower end Pro League team or an MDL team, almost very similar to Cutler. So that's just kind of where I'm at. Definitely wasn't doing it for me. Definitely wasn't really producing well for the team. I can certainly understand why Envy didn't want to keep him around. As far as the pieces they have retained Nifty. Now, I don't understand what the hell is even going on with Envy when they first brought on Nifty, because you basically picked up Nifty, and he wasn't your in-game leader, and he wasn't your primary opper. So what in the fuck were you doing then at that point? I mean, you basically stripped him of the two main roles he played on Renegades when he was coming up and looking like maybe another NA player that people should keep eyes on. I mean, there was talk even that Nifty could be good enough to go play for Cloud9 when they were in need of an opper, when Skadoodle had retired. And so, you know, this is a guy that could very well have been on a better team as a primary opper, or perhaps as an in-game leader if there was a team in need. And then he just kind of goes to Envy the wither away on a team that almost gets relegated from Pro League and doesn't get to play any of his roles. So it just seemed like it was just a waste of time for Envy and for Nifty for, you know, that whole time they played together at the end of 2018 and into the early part of this year. Now, with that said, on this team, I do think that perhaps he could maybe get back to in-game leading. I don't see who else would be in-game leading on this team. I know Fugly did it for a short amount of time for Energy, but never really stuck with the role, so I wouldn't expect him to be doing it. Somme, obviously the new young guy, he's not going to do it. JDM never known to do it. Android never known to do it. So I imagine Nifty's probably the captain of this team and will be returning to an IG role. I haven't seen anything official that states that. Maybe there is. If there is, I'm sorry I missed it. Just didn't quite catch it. But I would imagine that probably makes the most sense. Him doing that and him being a secondary opper as he was anyway, I think will certainly be beneficial. And maybe he can get into some better rifling roles. I mean, at times when I watched him play for Envy online, he was just kind of like lurking, playing edge of the map. And it didn't even make sense because at times when he didn't have an op on other teams, he would at least still be kind of like an assertive rifler, like part of the main control group or something. So it just seemed like he was just way out of his element. It didn't really make sense how he was being implemented, but I think it can make sense now going forward if he is indeed going to be the captain, maybe be a more aggressive rifler, maybe to be that secondary opper. And certainly we already did see a little bit of that in the DreamHack Masters Dallas qualifier, which is the only thing that this new lineup has played. And he actually played a lot better individually at that tournament compared to anything he did, you know, at the minor play-in or any of the online play before that, where he was really, really struggling to be able to perform. So I would expect an uptick in his level of play if he gets in a more comfortable role going forward. As far as JDM goes, staying on the team, obviously, I was actually pretty impressed by how this guy started to kind of get back to form. I mean, when he first came to the team, he obviously hadn't played for many months in an official setting after being let go from Team Liquid way back when. And so you knew he was going to be a bit rusty. It would probably take some time to kind of work himself back into a decent level. You know, obviously didn't look that great in EPL or at that DreamHack Atlanta event. But from that point forward, he really started to put numbers on the board. He looked pretty good at this last minor, looked pretty good in this Dallas qualifier, you know, had his moments at that Starlighter qualifier and such at the end of last year. So I think he seems to be kind of getting back to a pretty good level. Definitely is getting to a point where he's got a respectable opera inside the scene again. And so I think that if you can keep that up, if you can keep the trajectory going in a positive direction, then I think he definitely could maybe be like a star player for this team, give them a chance to win some games and do a lot better in these next seasons of the pro leagues and maybe make some noise in some online qualifiers. And just be a reliable fragger for this team to give them some type of fragging volume so that they can actually be a competitive team. So that's kind of where I'm at with him. I'm glad to see him get back into shape, and I hope that continues because I feel like with this team, him and Nifty are going to have to be some of the bigger frag producers on the team in order for them to be like a truly competitive team in the NA region. So hopefully we'll see that happen. Now, of course, the newcomers to the team, the one that is probably the name that people are most excited about is Somme, because he's this young 16-year-old player, hasn't really played very much, only really at an MDL level, did pretty good whenever he played at MDL and like Fragadelphia and other small little events like that, but he's never really been doing anything really big. Of course, there was a time when people thought that he might be a new starter for Complexity. They were certainly interested in him. They had signed him on as a streamer. He was too young to compete, obviously, in the Pro League, so they didn't put him into that right away, but for whatever reason, that just kind of fizzled out and they never brought him on board. Most recently, before joining this team, we did see him play in the IEM Sydney qualifier, where he played with Soul Patrol alongside Swag and then three of the guys who are now in E United, and they actually won that qualifier. And he looked really, really strong in this qualifier. And so, he definitely has turned some heads. He definitely is a pretty versatile player, can do some opping, can do some aggressive rifling. Definitely seems like a guy who could be the youth of this team, that could be that young, upcoming star this team is relying on for fragging volume. I will say, though, he did have a really piss-poor DreamHack Dallas qualifier. You hope that's just like kind of a fluky thing that, normally he doesn't perform that badly. I think that's actually probably the worst event overall he's ever had in his entire career as far as like rating and KD ratio and things of that nature. So hopefully that was just kind of a small thing as he's adjusting to a new team and obviously being an inexperienced player at top level competition. I would expect him to hopefully develop and be a pretty good player. The jury's obviously still out though. Don't know what he's going to wind up becoming. Again, he hasn't really played that many officials, definitely doesn't really have that much offline experience, again, other than like maybe Fragadelphia. I don't think he's ever played a LAN before. I think it's the only LAN he's ever played in his career that I'm aware of is that one Fragadelphia event. So I think the jury's still massively out on this. Maybe Nifty can kind of help bring him up. He definitely has some experience as leader nowadays. If they can get the right coaching staff, something like that, maybe he can develop into something and actually be the heartbeat of this team as far as fragging goes, alongside Nifty and JDM's opping. Definitely someone to keep an eye out on, that's for sure. Definitely think it's a smart move for Envy in the position that they're in to take a gamble on someone like this and hope for the best. Then the other players are familiar faces. Fugly comes over from Energy. I do think that he was definitely the person that had to get cut to bring Tarek on board on Energy, but I definitely don't think that him being cut was some sign that he just was worthless as a player and didn't have any value. I definitely think that he can do his job. He can fulfill a role. He can be like a more passive rifler and more supportive force. Definitely think he does a pretty good job at it. He's probably not going to output consistently as far as like, high fragging output, but he can have his games where he pops off and he can still play decent enough to where he's not like a burden on your team. He's doing his job and helping fulfill a role. Definitely did do that throughout a lot of his time on Energy. I think he actually came a long way on this, most recent roster of Energy he was playing on. When you compare it to when he was playing on like the mixed European NA Energy or when he was playing on CLG back in like 2016, I feel like he did kind of revitalize his career a little bit on that Energy lineup he was playing with throughout all of last year. I definitely think he can be a very valuable piece for Envy. Again, Envy's doing a great job kind of picking up pieces that have fallen off of some of the, higher ranked North American teams and understanding that, hey, this player, even though he got cut, he definitely can do something for us. I think that can help, increase the overall level of this team. So definitely glad to see Fugly has found another place to play. And then the last player being Android. Now, when Android got cut from Complexity, I didn't think he was their weakest player at that time. I thought that someone like Def or something actually was statistically a worse player and that Android might still be able to fulfill a role for Complexity going forward. But for whatever reason, Complexity saw things in other players over Android, so they did decide to remove Android. I'm not sure if there was like, personal issues or, a conflict of philosophy on the game or what could have gone on. Obviously, I can't know what's going on the team, and they know what's best in that regard. But certainly, I figured he had a little bit more time left on Complexity. I felt like there was some other people that would be on the chopping block before him. But nonetheless, he has been cut. Now he's going to be on Envy. Again, he's very similar to Fugly. He's a more passive player, likes to play on the edge of the map. So I would expect like him and Fugly to be kind of the peripheral or solo role players, while like Nifty, JDM, and Somme are probably going to be like the main control group is how I expect the roles to be set up. I didn't really get to watch much of the Dallas qualifier, so I'm not 100% sure if that's what the plan is. But I would imagine that's going to be the case. And again, I think just like Fugly, he can fulfill a role. He's going to get his kills. He's not going to be a huge fragging burden on your team, but he's not going to be a big star player either, probably. He's going to be probably neutral most of the time. He'll definitely have his games where he can play well, but you're not going to really count on him to. You're just going to count on him to do his job and be at least somewhat stable. So I think that's really how this team's designed. It's like Android and Fugly are going to be kind of your role players. They're going to be, kind of just, helping the team out, not really going to be heavy fraggers. Might have some games where they do help maybe with communication. These guys are more experienced where they can help bring Somme up alongside Nifty and things of that nature. So I definitely think they can be valuable, but they're not going to be star players, right? But that's fine. But what that does mean is that Somme needs to be a superstar level player for this team to be able to really go anywhere, in my opinion. That and JDM needs to continue to play well and maybe even build more upon it. And then Nifty is in this weird hybrid role where he's probably going to be the in-game leader. He's probably going to have to help support certain people at times, but he also needs to be a pretty high-level fragger to go alongside JDM and Somme if this team wants to truly be competitive against some of the other lineups in the North American region who do have a lot of talent on their lineups. So when you kind of wrap all that up, I do think that this is certainly an improvement to what Envy was before. I definitely feel like they did trim off some players who weren't performing very well. They took the right gamble, I think, in the position that they're in to bring in someone like Somme, who's very young, who has shown maybe some promise. Definitely when you're kind of towards the bottom of the pro rankings, that is the perfect time to be taking gambles on players like that to see if they can be something that helps kind of drive you up the totem pole. And then since JDM is starting to kind of get back in form, I think he's a great opera to have. There's not that many operas in the region anyway who play at a very top level, especially who are available. And again, I did see him start to kind of grow towards the end of last year into this year. So if he can continue to do that, he'll be valuable. And then Nifty, hopefully him getting back to some roles that make sense for him will allow him to perform better, allow him to have more impact on this team and help drive them forward. So that's kind of where I'm at. Obviously, I haven't really seen him play very much. Obviously, the jury is still out on a player like Somme, so I can't really know what to expect. But I definitely think this is a step in the right direction for Envy. I think it's certainly an improvement. Definitely think they did need drastic changes, and they did make some big moves. And I'm sure this is a sign they'll make big moves again in the future if they need to. So this will definitely be interesting to follow. Hope you folks enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe for more content. Catch you next time.